Speaking might be the very last bastion of resistance, something that is unlikely to be replaced anytime soon, maybe ever.
We're getting out of practice in terms of our own communication. Like, what do I sound like? What's my tone of voice?
In an increasingly AI world, this skill has never been more important. Welcome to the SpeakerPath. I'm Brian Miller, founder and principal consultant at Clarity Up.
I'm Francisco Mafuz, the story specialist at Clarity Up.
I'm Joanna Jongsma, Joe for Friends, and I'm the presence and performance specialist at Clarity Up.
Let's talk about speaking. Why would anybody in 2025 want to or need to invest in their ability to communicate through the spoken word? There's a few different reasons that people might want to do, and there's a few different possible outcomes and all these different things. So we need to communicate I'm going to start us with a dismal or futurist look at this, but I think of all the reasons to invest in the ability to speak verbally these days is that it is becoming increasingly impossible to figure out if you're talking to a human or not on the internet. Even in the spoken word, if it's audio, right? There are a few major podcasts. This is all us speaking for real. These are real humans talking right now. There are major podcasts that have revealed. Brian. Speak for yourself.
I couldn't make this meeting. I sent the avatar.
Oh, man. I mean, but that's the thing. If somebody's listening to this in pure audio form right now, they just have to take our word for it that we are actually real humans having this conversation. I expect that in the next 12 to 18 months, if not sooner, a huge amount of business and communication around the world of business, and even not business, even in your personal life, you got to meet a contractor. I expect people to want to feel like they need to meet someone physically in the real world where they can poke them in the shoulder again, which means you don't have the ability to ask an AI, how should I write this? How should I frame this? You need to be able to navigate real-time conversations that are unpredictable, where someone might say something you don't agree with or you don't like or in a way you didn't understand. And you need to be able to get your points across and move people to take the action you're hoping that they're going to take at the end of it. So I'm going to start there. I think in an increasingly AI world, this skill has never been more important.
I was just kind of imagining everybody sitting in meetings and drafting their responses with ChatGPT. I mean, the more we hand out to AIs, people writing their emails, their social media posts, all of that stuff with the help of AI at the moment, we're just losing touch and we're getting out of practice in terms of our own communication. Like, what do I sound like? What's my tone of voice? I don't know. ChatGPT tells me how to be funny or how to be concise or whatever I want to sound like at any given time, right? So I don't even have a personality or a voice anymore because I'm outsourcing all of that to my kind of AI appendix.
Well, I think if we're going to be very doom-mongering about technology, speaking might be the very last bastion of resistance, because you can replace most of communication these days correctly, well or not, with large language models like GPT, but someone standing in front of other people and speaking is something that is unlikely to be replaced anytime soon, maybe ever, right? So I don't see a place where we just don't do meetings anymore or kickoff events or just meetings with the people that you work with and you just play a video and that's all you're doing. I mean, in some contexts that might happen, but that still seems not something that's going to have, adoption everywhere else. So if you can stand up, figuratively and speak to other human beings well, that is something that will be very hard to outsource to AI for now.
Well, it's interesting. I am less optimistic about what you just said about those kinds of meetings not being replaced with videos. I'm less optimistic about that. I think we're already seeing it. And I think a lot of companies are implementing it. And there are a lot of people who are interviewing for jobs right now that on the job posting forums are reporting that their interviewer was an AI. And so what I actually think is maybe 80 or 90% of all of that stuff is going that way. And it's the 10% of people that know how to make a meaningful connection with a human being and knows how to get their points across in a compelling way. There's going to be an outsized return for like the 10% of people or less, maybe the 5% of people who are really world-class at doing that. Like, to the victor go the spoils. And I think all the spoils are going to go to an increasingly small subset of people that, one, have invested in this skill, and two, Joe, to your point, have not lost it. because I'm very excited about AI. There's a lot of wonderful things about it, and I find it very useful as a thought partner and finding out areas of my thinking that I'm missing, gaps in my thinking or studies I wasn't aware of or different angles I haven't considered. I find it very useful. But you have to remember that in order to be able to use an AI as a thought partner, you actually need to be reasonably competent in the thing that you're talking about. You need to know quite a bit about it because you get the answers to the questions you ask. If you don't know what questions to ask, if you don't know how to go, that thing that you just said, AI, I'm not sure I totally agree with that. And what about this context over here? And it goes, well, that's a good point. And now you're working back and forth with it. That's useful. But what happens when we have an entire generation that has never had to do that, that doesn't actually know enough about the content or how to communicate or how to ask an interesting follow-up question? They can't use the AI in the way that those of us who are saying how great it is for that, they won't be able to use it in that way.
I guess the other way of thinking about this is that the more popular and efficient AI gets, at least for this type of thing, the more uniform that the content and the knowledge and all of that stuff is going to become. In a sense, we go back to something that was said right at the beginning of the internet, I think, which is knowledge is not a differentiator anymore. It's out there, right? So if you can do things in writing very efficiently with large language models, then that knowledge is no longer valuable. If those models get better at imitating a person, then doing that in writing doesn't become as valuable anymore. What you're left with is doing things that are less easy to replicate, which would be you in person, you on video. A lot of social media is more video these days than anything else. Or even if it is in writing, is you getting things like stories and personality across, which even though the models might be good at, there's still a chance that they're not going to be anywhere near as good as we are for a while. So speaking might be one of those things where you can still differentiate yourself. Doing something AI is not going to be able to do that well anytime soon.
And here's a biological perspective. So a lot of people have been using AIs lately for therapy and coaching, and they're pretty effective up to a point. But where I think there's a limit in that, and as well in, having a conversation partner, having a romantic partner as an AI, like people have been playing with that already, is that we regulate each other's body budgets, so to speak. So our nervous systems interact and manage. The way that our nervous system manages our body's resources depends on interaction with other nervous systems. And sometimes that's our pets, that's fine. Sometimes that's, other human beings. And AI will never be able to play that role for us and, be a supportive conversation partner all the way, because there isn't that kind of biochemical reaction that it's missing simply.
Yeah, that reminds me of how actors, I've known a few actors and you hear them talk about this a lot, which is like sometimes when there's a celebrity that's been cast in kind of a small movie, the celebrity actor will only be there to do their own coverage. They will do their lines and then they will leave. And the actor who's the scene partner, now the camera's been flipped around, who's supposed to be having the other end of that conversation, doesn't have the celebrity actor there to react to. And you wonder why the performance comes across as wooden, because they don't actually have the person. There will be a stand-in, maybe some just person, like some intern, go stand there, but it's not the same. And meanwhile, and I forget who it is, there was some really big celebrity actor that all kinds of actors had always said, this guy is the best scene partner. He stays, he's always there. He stands on the other side of the camera, even though he's not on camera, and he lets you react off of him. He does his lines with the same vigor and enthusiasm as he did when it was his coverage, so that I have something to work with emotionally, and we get such better performances. And that sounds kind of like exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I kind of put us on, I started us off with this. Francisco, you combined two phrases. You said doom, what did you say?
Doom-mongering.
Doom-mongering. You combined doom scrolling and fear-mongering. It was a great turn of phrase. Doom-mongering.
I knew it wasn't the actual thing. So this is, I had no idea what was going to come out. I knew it wasn't, that wasn't the actual sentence. I was like, let's just go with that and pretend nobody notices.
That was great. That is exactly what we tell our clients to do if in the middle of a sentence giving a talk. And it's like, if you've totally flubbed it, start over. But if you've just goofed a word, keep going. It's fine. Doom mongering. We're going to hashtag that.
But I think a doom monger is a thing. I think you are, like, if you know, the newspapers are always talking about, you know, the terrible things in the world.
I think
I think it does exist.
I think that's yours. I think I'm calling my IP attorney right now. I think we're trademarking that at this moment.
Who knows, right? No, what I was going to say was that we were talking about, like, why would anyone invest money on speaking skills? Because it's one of the only ways that people with no talent get to feel like rock stars, right? I mean, when are you ever going to have the opportunity to get up on stage in front of potentially hundreds of people and have like a rock star moment where you do something, you get applause, maybe a standing ovation, and everybody wants to talk to you after? I mean, I can't do stand-up. I cannot sing or dance to save my life. I don't play any sports. That's as close to it as I'm getting. So
I challenge that, Francisco, because my whole philosophy about working with speakers is all about talent. Like, talent is overrated. What we're doing, what we're helping people do, is not enhance their talent. We're kind of giving them tools and instruments and systems and all that stuff so that people without any talent can do this thing that we call speaking. But yeah, it does lead to rock star moments. I'll give you that.
I think you're both right, because like Francisco, we have both seen, and I've been very fortunate enough to actually sit in the audience for a handful of our clients to deliver their like TEDx talks and like watch them do the recording that later goes viral 6 months, 8 months later. And I have watched very quote unquote ordinary people, like experts who are typically just in an office somewhere doing research, go up there, and they're not smooth professional keynote speakers, but they deliver their message with conviction and with authority, and people swarm them afterwards. I have watched nerdy scientists have a line out the door of people who can't wait to talk to them, who come up and go, "Oh my gosh, do you have an Instagram? I need to follow you online." It is wild. So I think you're both right. And I would say, though, the word talent is so interesting, because talent. So I was in Oregon a couple weeks ago giving a keynote at a wellness academy kind of a conference for a company. And there were a bunch of great speakers, and I was the kickoff keynote. And so I was just chilling the rest of the day. And so I went and attended a handful of other sessions. And this one woman had been in her field for 40 years, and she's getting a little bit older and kind of just speaking as her like retirement career kind of thing. And we're talking, and I was giving her all this praise. And then she was asking about our work, and I said, "Oh, we also train speakers." So I was telling her about the training arm of what we do. I'm not just a speaker. I run this whole company that trains speakers. And she goes, "You know, it's interesting. It's cool that you do that, but there's something that you do that you have this innate talent that just can't be trained." She goes, "You are so charismatic." And I'm listening, going, where's she going with this? She goes, "And you make eye contact with the audience. You smile a lot. You make lots of gestures. You have great slides. The ideas are organized well. You interact with the audience." And I finally stopped her. I said, "Wait, time out. First, I appreciate the compliment, but listen to what you just said. You didn't describe innate talent. You just listed 8 individual skills. We train all those. Everything you just said. I can train people to smile. I can train people to use bigger hand gestures. We can teach them how to build great slide decks. We can teach them how to put the right ideas in the right order. Those are just a bundle of skills. It's not talent, Joe, to your point. It's like these are all learnable, teachable, trainable skills that anybody can do. And they don't suddenly need to be the smooth, polished Tony Robbins keynote speaker. They can just get up and give a great presentation and make a difference.
Well, we can train them to smile as long as they're not, children, because no child can be trained to smile. I'm not going there.
You can't tell them to smile. That's politically incorrect.
I have 2 girls, and there is no amount of direction say cheese works better than anything else, because otherwise you try to explain to someone how to smile and just go,
Yeah. You know what I have to do? I got Milo's turning 5 right soon, right? So he just graduated from preschool like 3 days ago. We had our whole moment. He got his final T-ball game of his first season. He got his first trophy. He was all excited. So, but this kid, he has this great, amazing smile. You got kids, they have, when they're just natural environment, these amazing smiles. And then you go, "I'm going to take a photo." And he does that thing, that weird,
the Chandler smile.
What is that? And so, of course, I got a 4 turning 5-year-old boy. So what do I do when I need a great smile? I go to take a photo. I'm like, "Milo, what's on your butt?" And then he laughs, and you take a photo, right? Anything butts is very funny. Big, his whole face lights up.
Still is.
So yeah, Francisco's laughing just as hard as Milo does. That's funny.
Well, something slightly more relevant about talent. I think it's very interesting that when people think about talent in the context of speaking, they're almost always thinking about not necessarily the wrong thing, but they're thinking about the least important things. So sure, some people feel more comfortable in front of an audience than other people. It makes your life easier as a speaker if you feel that way. Some people have a bit more facility for things like humor, right? It just comes more natural to them to be funny, for example. But that's not what moves the needle as a speaker. What moves the needle as a speaker is not even how smooth you are on stage, right? Those things are all important, but at the end of the day, if your content's not fantastic, then none of those other things are going to matter. And content is not talent. Right? People might be slightly better than others to organize ideas, but most people are not some Harris who extemporaneously talk like they're writing an essay and everything just flows in a controversial way. Most people need to be trained to put their ideas in order. So talent is not it.
And even the Sam Harrises of the world did not come out into the world like that. That is something he has developed and practiced. Like, think about the amount of time that guy's been communicating. Again, whether you like him or not, it's got nothing to do with his content right now. But the way he communicates, think about the tens of thousands of hours that he's been communicating in public. I guarantee if you could find 20 years ago videos of Sam Harris, it was not as smooth, as logical, as extemporaneous as that.
And if you watch his TED Talk, anyone who listens to him thinks, oh, this guy speaks in a very organized way. His ideas are very... Yes, but then watch his TED Talk and see how that is 100 times better. Right? There is not an and a sentence out of place. It's just like this idea flows into this idea, flows into this idea, lots of slides and stuff. But there is a different thing there. He just didn't get up there and, practice that a couple of times and did it. That was practiced to death. So yes, even people that are like that.
So I was just going to say, to kind of round off where we started this conversation, we went on the AI thing, which I kind of kicked us off on, and then we're talking a little bit around talent versus skill here. But, maybe, Joe, you can talk us through, because Francisco and I mostly work with people in very similar contexts over and over and over again, kind of very formal presentations, whether it's a 10, 12-minute TED Talk or a keynote, but it's pretty much spotlight, audience, stage. It's very formal. You work with folks much more often they might be formal environments, but also they're a little bit less formal.
Less organized.
Less organized is maybe the word.
It's often a meeting, right? With my corporate clients, it'll be a meeting with their team or with their board or a leadership team sometimes. So it's either kind of guiding and inspiring your team to make a change or do something, or managing up, as we call it in corporate speak. So presenting for your board would be one of those cases, for example. And what I see with them, kind of bringing these two dynamics together, right? The AI aspect that seems to be very kind of algorithmic. There's this model, that the pattern that we see we can all recognize AI written messages by now, emails and posts and all that. And then this admiration that we can't help but have for this natural chemical X that we like in communicators. They're also kind of stuck in between these two poles and trying to figure out, how can I bring something from each of them? And very often being in this less organized setup where you're just sitting around the table with other people, it can be a little bit treacherous, because it can feel like I don't need to prepare the same way that I would for a talk. I don't need to deliver, and obviously you don't deliver the same way, right? You need to be as big as the room, but it doesn't mean you don't need to fine-tune how you show up in your delivery and all that. So there are different questions that come up, but around the same things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's interesting to notice.
I love that phrase, you need to be as big as the room. I think that's something, when you're only working on the page, when we're doing really pure message design and you're just working on the blank page, you can see the words, they're the right words and they're in the right order. And then the way those exact words would be delivered on a stage in front of 500 people versus in a coffee shop with one person versus in a boardroom with 12 people, the way those words need to come out of your mouth. Sometimes I actually will work with someone when I know they're going to be in a conversational, more of a we're sitting around a table environment. I will literally train them to add the things that Toastmasters trains people not to do. I will train them to add in the ums and so's and buts into these perfect sentences, because if somebody asks you, what do you do? And you go, you know how, and then you just like start cold. It's like real weird. But if you go, so you know
I
how
help people become more interesting than Netflix.
Right, exactly. I help people. Yeah.
Say you weirdo.
Who else is here?
Right, exactly. Yeah, next. But if you literally just go, so, and then you start, you could say the exact same sentence you were about to say, but that will feel conversational, because that's what people do. They think when they're talking. So it's like you want to be prepared, but come across as extemporaneous in some situations. And that also is a real skill that needs to be practiced.
Or use the person's name. Like, Brian, here's what comes up for me when you say that, right?
Yes.
That's a way to kind of connect with that person and not make it sound like you're giving a TED Talk from your seat at the table.
I heard an interesting, funnily enough, from Toastmaster, some way to describe this process. What he said was, it was this guy who's about to compete in the world championship or whatever, and he's with some friends, and he's like, no, I need to go back to my room to practice. And they're like, you've been practicing this thing for weeks, right? There is no way you don't know that by heart, that you're not ready to give it. It's like, no, I'm ready to give it, but I need to take some of the polish off. Like, I know it by heart, but it's too, it's like, oh, it's perfect already. No, that's the problem. It's too perfect. I need to take some of that off and make it sound like I haven't rehearsed this a million times.
Right. So I feel like we can kind of recap a little bit. I mean, there's a whole, the kind of question of the, episode is like, why would somebody invest, and not just money, but because, you don't, listen, you can become an extraordinary speaker without investing a penny these days, or you can work with somebody. There's lots of different ways forward. But why would somebody invest money or time or energy in 2025 moving forward? You might be listening to this in 2028. It's only going to get crazier. As far as I'm concerned, it's only going to be more important. Why would you invest that? It's like, well, one, because it will be your only differentiator in an increasingly AI automated, robot-driven world, right? Your humanity is your differentiator. But then two, there are many situations where you may be asked to present, whether it's in a boardroom or you might have just a coffee meeting with someone, but you need to convince them, essentially. You need to move them towards something that you're trying to get them to do, or an action. You might need to earn buy-in. Might need to get someone to support your message or share it with somebody else. There are so many circumstances that we find ourselves in on a daily basis. And I think most folks who live outside of our world, the world that the three of us live in and obsess over, do not put much thought into the words that come out of their mouth and the way that they come out of their mouth, and just how outsized the impact is for getting even a little bit better at doing that.
Well, I guess the question is not why should you invest money on it? Because the point is, you are going to spend money on it anyway. The question is, are you investing money to make yourself better, or is it costing you money because you didn't, right? Because when it comes to job promotions, when it comes to presentations, when it comes to talking to clients, if you're a better communicator, that's going to pay off. If you're a worse communicator, that's going to cost you. So money will be moving one way or the other anyway. The question is, in which direction is it going to be moving? So, it's a fake saving, the one where you don't put it towards some of these things, because it comes out anyway.
I'm thinking of something my husband said about photography, where he will meet with clients and they'll often comment on photographs, and people rarely can tell what is good or bad about a photograph if they're not professional, but they can always tell that it is good or bad. And I find that it's so similar to a talk or a meeting or whatever communication situation. Like, people can't very often define what it is that someone is doing well or not so well, but they can always feel it. And which side of that story do you want to be on? A bit kind of like what you're saying, Francisco. It's going to be moving one way or the other. Which do you choose?
Absolutely. Thanks for listening. Visit thespeakerpath.com to start your speaker path, because ideas don't speak for themselves. People do.